Steve Dotto here for LearnNowBC. Let's continue our discussion of privacy settings on Facebook. This is the area that we all need to pay attention to, whether we're veteran Facebook users or neophytes. Making sure that we have control over our privacy on Facebook is paramount. Where we go to set our privacy settings, the easiest place to go to find your settings is under that little arrow in the top right-hand side of Facebook and choose the privacy settings menu item. Now, when we talk about privacy, we really need to understand Facebook's concept of our community. Our community consists of our friends. We have friends, and then there are friends of our friends. So Facebook thinks that we have these radiating circles that move out from us. And we have ourselves, then we have our friends, then we have friends of our friends, and then we have everybody. So there's three basic circles of people. We set up our privacy settings in two areas. We set it up globally, so we set up some global settings that apply to everybody, and if we don't make any changes, they apply to all of our Facebook settings. And then when we have activities on Facebook ourselves, when we post photographs or messages, we can then control the privacy for each of those items as we post them. And I'll show you a little bit more on that in a few moments. But here in the privacy settings, the very first thing we need to do is we need to determine how we want to control our default privacy. In other words, if we don't make any changes when we make a post, this is how our privacy is going to be established. They give us the option of setting up public, which means anybody can see anything that we post on Facebook. And in a word, that's a bad idea. I don't recommend anybody use the public settings. It's basically irresponsible, I think, if you do choose that. Most people are going to choose friends. In other words, once a person is established as a friend. Now remember, Facebook is permission-based, so somebody's going to have to ask you to be their friend, so you're going to have to acknowledge they're your friend. Once they're established as a friend, then they can see and they can interact with your different posts or your different activities on Facebook. That's what most people set. If you want to set a little more control over your privacy, then go into your custom privacy settings. And here we can choose from a little drop-down menu to have friends of friends, friends, specific people, or only me as our default. So you can set up a little more control at this point. Most control comes when you actually designate within each element on Facebook as you post it, as you create a new item, if you create a rule at that particular point. But this is again for our general points. So I don't mind having friends of friends being able to see most of my content. We can set up to hide this stuff, and we also say friends of those tagged. In other words, if somebody's been tagged in a post, most often that's going to be in a photograph. If somebody is tagged in one of my photographs, or if I tag somebody in one of my photographs, I will allow their friends to see it as well as my friends. So we set up the control that way. Now I've got a fairly liberal settings, but I follow one really important rule on Facebook. I never post anything that I'm at all uncomfortable with. So if it happens to spill out to people that I don't necessarily intend it to, there's really no harm done, because I never post anything that I consider to be at all controversial or anything inappropriate. I maintain the idea that even though I set privacy settings, anything that I post has a chance of being shared beyond what I'm expecting. So I'm not going to take a chance and embarrass myself by having something inappropriate posted. So this is the kind of the philosophy that you have to determine where you sit in the whole Facebook world. Moving on in the different privacy settings, how we connect allows us to determine how people connect with us, how they search for us online, whether they can see our name, whether they can see our email address, if they can search us through that in the Facebook search in order to connect with us. Who can send me Facebook friend requests, either everyone or just people that have established themselves as friends of our friends, and who can send me Facebook messages, whether it's just friends or friends of friends. Now I keep this, as you see, fairly open on my own account because I use Facebook as an outreach, almost as a part of my business. And so since I've been doing the show for many years, people often have questions for me. I allow them to connect through Facebook. If they're smart enough to find me on Facebook, I'm happy to try and answer a question or two. That's my own thresholds for privacy. Next, we set the settings for the timeline and how things are tagged. I think this is a really important menu to go into. First of all, we choose who can post on our timeline. For people who've used Facebook for a while but haven't really figured out the whole new timeline interface, this is the same as posting on your wall. So this is who's allowed to say things and create new posts on your wall or in your timeline. Who can see them is the next choice. Review posts that are your friends tag you in before they appear on your timeline. This is where I think it gets really important. If somebody has tagged you in a post or in a photo and identified you with that particular message, you can choose to turn on a review process where before it gets posted referencing you, you have to approve it. This is a really good way for you to control the message about you that's being posted online. So if I set that and enable it, now anybody who posts anything that's tagged Steve Dotto, before it gets posted, it's going to come to me for approval, and I'm going to have to say yes or no. That's a really great way of controlling, especially tagged photographs. If you're at a grad party or a high school reunion, and somebody's been taking pictures, and you don't necessarily want all of those pictures posted on Facebook, and somebody's tagged you in them, you can say I want to make sure that I'm identified, that I have control over whether or not I'm identified in these photos before anybody else sees them. And that, to me, is one of the most important settings you can set in your privacy. We continue on, and as you work through each of these different issues, you'll gain more and more control over your privacy. I don't have time in this particular video to go over each and every aspect, but you see how you're going to want to work through each and every one of these different menu items in order to determine exactly how your privacy works. Now, before I leave this, I want to show you how you actually go about setting privacy in each individual item. So we've done that globally now by resetting our settings within the privacy settings there. But now, if I create a new post saying, "Hey world," before I ever post this, I can go into my custom settings here, and I can choose who sees them. I can choose a custom configuration, only myself, friends except acquaintances, friends, or close friends, or different groups. So you can see that I can create a really great degree of control over all of my posts before they're ever posted by paying a little bit of attention to the permissions as I post the item. One last thing that I want to show you before we move into our next video, and that is this little menu item here in the center, just next to your activity log. You can view as. Most people completely ignore this, but this is a very valuable tool. This allows you to view your site or your page as your friends or visitors see it. So not as the person who owns the page, but as somebody coming into the page. This gives us a really good idea of exactly what's being shared and what's not being shared. It's a good exercise to go through your page and see how it looks to others visiting your page after you set your settings, and just to do it occasionally, make sure that all of your settings are in place. You click on back to timeline, and now I'm back in control of my timeline. For LearnNowBC, I'm Steve Dotto.